What's going on, Orange Nation? This is Neil Adler with the latest episode of Syracuse Central via the Fan Arch Network. Happy Friday. 1 week from tomorrow, Syracuse football is playing. Holy smokes. Can't believe it. Super psyched for Syracuse football, Tennessee in Atlanta on August 30th to start the season. But we're going to do some Syracuse basketball today, and specifically some Syracuse basketball recruiting because, how do I put it? The 2026 class for Syracuse, like most teams right now, is kind of in flux. There, as I've mentioned in the past on this show and articles I've written for other sites, there aren't a lot of the top high school prospects in the 2026 class who have committed to a school at this point, and that has to do with revenue sharing, NIL, conference realignment, the transfer portals explosion, and teams focusing more recruiting efforts on the transfer portal versus traditional high school recruiting. I think all those factors, and there could be other ones that I don't know about, are coming into play, and that's why you're not seeing a lot of the top 2026 guys verbally committed to a school at this point. So we're going to focus on 2026 here, and a couple different stories. And the first one has to do with a five-star wing from Connecticut. His name is Abdu Tore, and Tore just dropped his top seven this week, and it didn't include Syracuse basketball. I wasn't super surprised by that. At the same time, as I've noted over the summer, Syracuse was in for Tore on the Adidas 3 SSB circuit. He plays for the Boston-based BABC, the Boston Amateur Basketball Club. And Adrian Autry was in the house for Tore at least one or two times. That didn't necessarily mean to me that Syracuse was a heavy player for Tore, but it's something to monitor. He's a five-star wing in the 2026 class. He's a top 25 national prospect. Syracuse offered him last summer. And again, Syracuse is not in the top seven. He plays at Notre Dame High School in Connecticut. He's a two-time Player of the Year in Connecticut, according to Max Preps, and I think he was this past year. He was the the Player of the Year in Connecticut, according to Max Preps, the last 2 years, and then this past year, according to Gatorade. I think I got that right. He averaged like 25 points a game. He was a third-team junior All-American, according to Max Preps. Just a dynamic wing, explosive player, 6'5", 6'6" range. Some of the schools that the chatter I'm hearing about that we should monitor, although I guess Syracuse fans aren't going to care that much at this point, but that are heavy in the mix for Tore. UConn is definitely one of them, being an in-state school. Arkansas is another big-time program, John Calipari, that's in the mix for Tore. Providence has been recruiting him for a long time. Louisville is another name that I'm hearing for Tore. My point in bringing this up is that Syracuse is out of the running for Tore, and I'm not ever sure that they're a huge player. But again, I'd gotten a little bit of hope when I saw reports that Autry was in for Tore over the summer during at least one live period with BABC. It just goes to show you that I even though I have sources and I have some clue about what's going on and have intel and that, it's still in flux with 2026 for Syracuse is the bottom line. So that's why I'm bringing up Tore, because he dropped the top seven this week and didn't include Syracuse, and just wanted to pass that along. And this next story is going to play along those lines as well. And it leads into kind of the larger picture. Who are the top targets for Syracuse, which I can talk about a little bit as well. So we'll move on from Abdu Tore to someone from the DMV, which is my hometown, the Baltimore, Washington area, and that is Nico Monday. Nico is a 2026 four-star point guard, combo guard. He's a top 50 to 60 national prospect. He plays in the DMV for a program in Maryland, plays for New World on the AAU circuit, and he's a high-scoring guard. And he took an unofficial visit to Syracuse in late August of 2023 for their annual elite camp, which is also, by the way, coming up this Saturday, and I'll be monitoring in terms of participants and offers, and I'll share some more of that here for Syracuse Central. But Monday, he dropped the top eight in the last few days. Did not include Syracuse. Again, kind of with Torre, I wasn't 100% surprised by it, but I was kind of hoping that Syracuse would be in the mix for Monday. Um, he he's been visited by Syracuse during like the fall recruiting period at his program in Maryland and in the Maryland suburbs of Washington D.C. Um, he's been evaluated and watched by Syracuse during live periods on the AAU circuit. I was told that by a source in the late spring that they were watching Monday. The staff was. Um, but as he was setting some official visits more recently, and Syracuse wasn't in the mix, that kind of led me to believe that all right, Syracuse is probably out for Nico Mundy. Um, in terms of Syracuse's top targets, and we've talked about this a little bit, 2026, Jordan Smith Jr., Duron Rippey, easily the two top targets. Then you've got guys like Vaughn Carvalha. Carvalha and Rippey are officially visiting Syracuse the same weekend in late September. Asher Elson is a four-star big man. He's visiting in October. Dakari Spear, a four-star guard as well, is visiting, but we don't have a date yet. We'll see if Jordan Smith, he has unofficially visited. We'll see if he visits at some point. Then you got to keep in mind guys like Alex Costanza, who has visited Syracuse last fall. He took an official visit to Syracuse. At the time, his dad told me Syracuse was a front runner. Things kind of quieted down. I know during one of the more recent live periods on the AAU circuits that Autry and I believe Alan Griffin were in for Costanza on. He plays on one of the AAU circuits, the Pro 16, the Puma sponsored circuit. And his dad has told me that he might visit Syracuse again, but last time I texted with him a few weeks ago, nothing had been set up. So Costanza's in the mix as well. Alio Dio, I always mispronounce his name. I'm so sorry to this young man. Dio is plays for CIA Bella Vista in Phoenix, same school as Carvalho's playing for this year. He just dropped a list cut, which I believe I mentioned on one of the recent shows. He's scheduled some official visits, not to Syracuse yet. Let's see if he schedules one, but he's another guy in the mix. Beyond that, they recently offered Ralph Scott from IMG, as I've mentioned, but I don't know that Syracuse is a big player for him. So I think the guys I just mentioned are probably the top targets, and I think Rippey and Smith are going to be long shots, so to speak, given the competition. But guys like Dakari Spear, Carvalha, Asher Elson, those are guys that have, Syracuse has a really good shot of landing, and then we'll see about DOM and Costanza, and then there's also MJ Madison, who I'm going to talk about in the fourth block here. But it's still kind of in flux, and they could end up offering some more guys. We'll see. But Syracuse is out for Nico Monday and Abdu Tore, but they're still in the mix for some other highly ranked 4 and 5 star players. So that's the thing with Nico. I'd hope Syracuse would have been a bigger player for him. I really like his game. I think he's underrated. He comes from the DMV, so I have that kind of affinity for him, given that's my hometown area as well. But he's got some other good schools in the mix. He's a great player, and I wish him well. So from that, we're going to transition to something that I've been meaning to talk about for a bit, because it's kind of been lingering, and I've been kind of hearing different things. And it's I love my alma mater. I always say that, always come out with that, but this story is a little irritating to me. So there are various high school programs in New York State that Syracuse has recruited over the years, and it ebbs and flows, and just whatever. There's no necessary rhyme or reason. And one of the big ones recently has been Long Island Lutheran, which is where Kyan Anthony went to school. He's a freshman at Syracuse. MJ Madison, who I'm going to talk about in the next segment, was playing there. He's transferring somewhere else. That's the news there. But besides Long Island Lutheran, you've got schools like Cardinal Hayes or Our Savior Lutheran, in New York City, and then you've got some other programs like Archbishop Stepanak, which is in White Plains, New York. So Archbishop Stepanak is one of the best programs in New York State, and they had an excellent year this past year. I believe Max Preps had him in their top 25 national rankings at the end of the year, or right on the fringe. They're a really strong program, and they have some really good players. And three guys I want to mention here are Josiah Jervis, who's a 2026 four-star wing, and then two brothers, twin brothers, Adonis Ratcliffe and Darius Ratcliffe. They're both four-star power forwards slash centers. As I've written about elsewhere, this is the first time I'm talking about them on Syracuse Central, but I've written about these guys in the past. They all had received some level of interest from Syracuse either earlier this year or even into like a year or two ago. Josiah Jervis, I'm pretty sure, was receiving interest from Syracuse 2 years ago when Boeheim was still the coach. But no offers ever went out to any of those three guys. And, I don't know all the ins and outs, and I don't like to, well, I speculate some, but I don't want to like misstate things. They all received interest from Syracuse. Was it a question of why they didn't receive offers because they didn't ultimately have that interest in Syracuse, or Syracuse just was more interested in other guys? That's something that I don't fully know the answer to. All I can say is that over the summer there were some live periods, including a Scholastic live period, where prospects would suit up for their instead of suiting up for their AAU teams, they'd suit up for their high school programs. And there was an event where Stepanek was playing at. And I was told by someone who had direct knowledge, direct knowledge, I'll leave it at that Syracuse showed up at this event to look at the Stepanek guys. And I don't know which staff member was there. And even if I did, I'm not going to call him out because there's no point to it. And I'm not trying to be nasty here. I'm just being honest. But the Syracuse staff, according to this source, was at this event, but not for very long. And then this source basically said to me afterwards, yeah, Syracuse isn't recruiting any of our guys, not recruiting Josiah Jervis, the Ratliff twins. And this source said, that's kind of weird. And I agree. I don't understand that. I don't know the ins and outs. So again, I don't want to like rip on my alma mater too much. But it would seem like Syracuse, which is one of the, better known brands in college basketball in the Empire State. Obviously, St. John's is coming along nicely with Rick Pitino as the head coach these days. But you would think that Syracuse would want to recruit Archbishop Stepanek heavy. And it just doesn't seem like they are. To be fair, in the 2027 class, a four-star guard named Josh Rivera, he played at the Syracuse Elite Camp not 2 years ago, but this past year in 2024. And then when the contact period opened for the 2027 class, meaning college coaches could start initiating direct communication with these rising juniors, that opened on June 15th. As I reported, Syracuse reached out to like more than 24 guys, and Rivera was one of them. So we'll see if an offer comes to Rivera. But for right now, and I don't want to like belabor this for too long, it just seems weird to me that Syracuse wasn't heavy for those 2026 guys from Stepanek. And it kind of came full circle for me when Josiah Jervis announced his top 8 earlier this week. And I was like, oh, that's weird. They never offered him, and the Ratliff twin, like, what's going on? So it is what it is. Things ebb and flow, and just like with Syracuse football, I like to see both the football and basketball programs branch out and beyond their comfort zone and recruit other states and geographic areas beyond like the traditional New York, New Jersey, Northeast corridor, the Philly market, DC, all that, the DC to Baltimore corridor. I like that, but at the same time, don't you gotta recruit guys in your own backyard, so to speak? And Stepanek's one of the really good programs. So hopefully that changes in the future. I just think that's super strange, and I'll leave it at that. So the last but not least, we're gonna talk about MJ Madison, and MJ Madison is a 2026 four-star power forward. He's just outside the top 100 according to a couple of recruiting services, and MJ was offered by Syracuse in the spring. I believe it was sometime in May. And around that time, I was told by a source that he had an interest in visiting Syracuse. I have not, and he's mentioned that to other analysts and or reporters in the past. So it's not like it was just, told to me. MJ, he played this past year at Long Island Lutheran alongside Kyan Anthony, and some other really good guys. Dylan Mingo, who is a 5-star point guard in the 2026 class, who holds a Syracuse offer, but I don't, unless something weird's going on that I just have totally missed and flaked on, or whiffed on, frankly. Syracuse is not a big contender for Dylan. But anyway, so MJ played there. The Crusaders were one of the best teams in the country. They started out slow, in part because Kyan was injured for part of the year this past season as a senior. But they came on strong late, made the Chipotle Nationals. They were top 5, the top 10 national team. They've added a bunch of new guys, including some guys from the DMV. So I did find that interesting in the last like week, 2 weeks. There were announcements about different guys going there, including some forwards. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. MJ is a power forward, and I follow him, cover him because he's a Syracuse recruit. And then word broke earlier this week that MJ's transferring. I'm not saying it's because of these other guys that came in. I'm just reporting a fact, just reporting the news. So MJ is transferring to Prolific Prep, which is like Long Island Lutheran, one of the top high school programs across the country. Long Island Lutheran plays in the EYBL Scholastic, which is probably the premier high school basketball conference, and they were at 14 teams this past year, and they're actually expanding, and I'll be covering that soon at Syracuse Central. Added a couple new teams. Meanwhile, Prolific Prep plays on the grind session, which is another elite circuit of prep school teams. Prolific Prep for this coming year transferred from Napa, California to Fort Lauderdale in Florida. So that's interesting. And so MJ's headed down to the Sunshine State. I believe he's from Atlanta originally. But again, he's going to Prolific Prep. Prolific Prep has absolutely loaded up this offseason with transfers. Besides Madison, multiple other guys, including Bruce Branch, who's the #1 prospect in 2027, Caleb Holt, 5-star guy, a couple others. I could go on and on. So they look to be in preseason rankings. They likely will be the #1 team in preseason rankings, if not the top 2 or 3. So MJ's going to transfer from one really strong school to another. In terms of his recruitment, does it make it harder that he's moving from New York State to Florida for Syracuse to get him up for an official visit? I don't know. I don't know about that. And I don't know if Syracuse has backed off at all or he has. I haven't been told that one way or another. Over the summer, a source had told me that they were in for him during live periods on the AAU circuit. He played, for the most part, I believe, with the City Rocks, Albany City Rocks in EYBL. Although there was one AAU period later in the summer where he played in another circuit. I'm having a senior moment, so excuse me. But anyway, he seems to still be a target for Syracuse. I'll follow his recruitment, see if he ends up scheduling a visit. But he's headed to Prolific Prep, and that'll be a big-time experience for him, and we'll see how much playing time he gets. And, I'll continue to follow Syracuse in the 2026, 2027, and 2028 classes. 2026, still kind of honing in, figuring out what exactly is going on, with some of their top targets. They've made list cuts, they're getting visits, but there's still more to be done. 2027, Syracuse, to my knowledge, has offered at least 13 guys, and I'll continue to follow them and look at, visits and all that stuff. And then in 2028, I believe Syracuse has offered 7 prospects. I think it's 7. Don't quote me, but I think it's 7. And those are rising sophomores. So, Syracuse is definitely active out there across these cycles, looking for their first verbal commit in 2026. I'll continue to monitor everything, pass along intel, visits, list cuts, etc. And I hope you enjoyed this show. It was all Syracuse basketball recruiting. I'll be back early next week. We'll definitely be diving into a lot of Syracuse football with week 1 right ahead for the Orange and Fran Brown. And I'll continue to follow Syracuse basketball and recruiting in both sports for you. I hope you're enjoying the show. Leave comments for me, good or bad. I appreciate you listening in. This is Neil Adler, the host of Syracuse Central via the Fan Arch Network. Thanks for tuning in, friends. Take care.